On the Monday Morning Quarterback, NorthJerseySports.com's original multimedia series, talking all things football across North Jersey. This is Season 5, Episode 10, as we head into the home stretch here with spaces in the state finals up for grabs this weekend. I am Corey Doviak, being joined by my illustrious panel of North Jersey football insiders, starting with the venerable one, the great Jimmy Avitabile. What's going on, Jimmy?
Hey, what's up, Corey? This is the weekend we've been waiting for since August, third scrimmages, so really excited.
Yeah, no doubt. Time flies, too. I mean, it went from hot at those scrimmages to awfully cold on Friday night. It's football playoff weather for sure, and one guy who loves it, can't get enough of it. In fact, he even cheated on his beloved game of American football just this past Tuesday night to go out and watch some world football because he can't get enough. He is the head Husky. He is Brian Carr. What's going on, Bri?
Hey, yes, I got to keep up the frenzy here. The season's coming to an end, and picked up a little soccer. I was up in Wayne last night, so I looked at the schedule, and I saw there was a soccer game in Oakland, so I caught the second half of an exciting state soccer game, so I'm excited. You know, it's too bad. The only problem I have with football now, there's so many good games, you can't go to them all. You only can get to see one on a Friday night, so I wish they would schedule double headers or something for us. We get to more games. But we'll just have to pick the best ones. There is a 6 o'clock and there's some 7 o'clock, so we get to maybe do two that way.
Yes, no, it's true. And you know what? We talked about it last week. Well, on this show, let's just preview what we're going to talk about. And that's actually a preview and a review. We're going to go over what happened last week in the opening round of the state sectional playoffs, and then we're going to preview to the best of our ability of what's coming up this week in the semifinals across North Jersey, which is, fine and dandy here. But, as we mentioned last week on the show, competitive first-round games were, Jimmy, not that easy to come by.
Yeah, some sections where the 1 seed wound up blowing out the 8 seed. But in other sections, they're more competitive. Deeper sections, like a North 1 Group 2, very, very talented. We knew there were 4 very talented teams, and those 4 teams have gotten through, pretty easily. So, I guess it depends upon the section.
Yeah, and let's start. Because last week in our preview section, when we were talking about the first round of the playoffs, we neglected really to talk about North 2 Group 2. Just slipped our mind. We're so North 1 centric. And it was a mistake on our part because in the top seed, is Rutherford. And Rutherford opened its state championship bid here as the number 1 seed, 30-6 win over Lyndhurst. And they're welcoming Lenape Valley into Tryon Field this Friday night. That should be a good one. Lenape Valley, the perennial powerhouse of Sussex County, and coming off a 50-14 victory for them. But, Jimmy, we should have maybe touched on Rutherford more. Not that we haven't done a lot of it between Brian going nuts with the NJIC final, which he did a good job for us for, and all that other stuff. But Rutherford, specifically, talking state tournament here, this is a tough semifinal round game against Lenape Valley, which at least they're making Lenape Valley make the trip.
Yeah, well, last year, they met last year also, and Lenape Valley came out with a W. As you mentioned, Coach Smolian, one of the legends in North Jersey, football, New Jersey football, well over 300 wins. Rutherford, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, might have come before since the beginning of the season than any team in North Jersey. And
we lost you there for a second. But yes, you were just mentioning that Rutherford might have come just as far as anybody in all of North Jersey, trying to catch up to the likes of Lenape Valley. Bri, you're a huge Lawson Fisher fan, and also a big Rutherford fan. How do you see this one playing out?
Rutherford's on a roll. I think running at 9-0 right now. Got through the NJIC. We haven't seen these other 3 teams in their bracket play, but I kind of give them the edge right now. Rutherford's on a roll. The quarterback duo that they have, Richie Marquez and Kyle Russell, those guys continue to, have a good season for them, and the defense is solid. So I think they should do well to, this game Friday night at Rutherford at home, and they play well at home. They've won almost, they won every game this year, but they won the NJIC there, so they have a home field advantage. And I think Andy Howell's going to get the kids, and the kids are following him, and they seem to have the right consistency going on right now.
Yeah, if you're going to win a state title, you're going to have to earn it. Bulldogs are going to have to do that against Lenape Valley with number 6 Hackettstown, which pulled an upset of Mountain Lakes in the first round, beat them handily 35-7, and then Caldwell, the number 2 seed. So it's Hackettstown, Caldwell on the bottom of that bracket. And Jimmy, we're going to switch to North 1 Group 2. We got a good interview that Brian Carr did with the boys from WCTV after Westwood's win. But before we get to that, just want to ask you, a nice little weekend for the NJIC. North 1 Group 1 was NJIC-centric, so you expect them to do well there. But you got, Manchester going out and winning a playoff game in a group up in, Group 2. They go out and win a game, and that was the first one in school history.
Tremendous job. We mentioned, how were they going to react after the loss in the NJIC semifinals to Rutherford. All they do is they go out, they beat obviously always a tough Crofton Lakes team on their own field, and then they go out last week and win the playoff game. So, they bounce back. That's a credit to their coaches and those kids who are 2 and 3 year starters, and they have a tough one against a very, very good Lakeland team this weekend, and should be a very competitive game.
Now let's just remind everyone of our picks in this bracket. Brian Carr, he took the dangerous road by picking the Newton-Pequannock winner to win the whole thing, because that was a toss-up. Both of those teams were undefeated going into the bracket. A tough turn of events with the way the PowerPoint shook out that they played each other in the first round. Brian Carr took Newton to win it all, and they are still alive after a 21-19 victory over Pequannock. I took Lakeland to win. They had a relatively easy time in a 33-0 victory over Mahwah, defending champion Mahwah, I might add. Manchester won, so it's Manchester, Lakeland, and then it's Newton, and it's Westwood. And Brian Carr, you were there for Westwood Ramsey. They played each other. It was a great game in the regular season, won by Westwood close. This one, a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, I think the key to the game is 5 turnovers. It was 49-0 halftime. And Westwood never had to drive the whole field. They would just turn them over and turn them over. The key problem is, like Larry says in the interview coming up, the opening kickoff, they ran back to the 25-yard line of the Rams, and from there it was just all downhill. The second drive, Westwood goes right in from 25 yards out. Next play, there's a snap, when the offense got the ball for Rams, snap goes over the head of the quarterback, and their star linebacker and wide receiver, Joe Kramer, he basically rushed in there and grabbed that fumble, and he was in the end zone, and, it was early. It was halfway into the first quarter, and they're up 14 or 13. I think they missed an extra point, and it was and then it kept going, interception, fumbles. And, Rams play them well. Ramsey does play them very well. It was only a 17-14 game. They were up by 10, Westwood, but they gave up a touchdown late to get it close. But, Ramsey always plays them tough, and everybody felt that way, and we thought it would be a good game, but by halftime. But you know what? The saving grace, it was a running clock, and it was a very cold night, so I was able to spend some time up in the box with the boys. And Corey, I did share with you that our friends, Larry, those guys are amazing. Larry, I go up there with a business card, and he's over there reading out the business card, and he's promoting NorthJerseySports.com on the middle of the show on air, and you couldn't have asked for it. I didn't even go in there and say, you got to do this. He just starts going. He's like talking about cannolis and meatballs, So they're great guys, and it was kind of cold, so we ended up staying up in the box after the game and did a little interview with the guys, and they are great. Just let them talk and don't say anything, just let them talk. So the interview was...
Yeah, the Phil and the Rizzuto of high school football in North Jersey. Larry LaFreary and John Francola. Here's their take on the postgame with our very own Brian Carr.
Brian Carr here in Westwood after a big Westwood Cardinal victory 49-7 over Ramsey. I'm here with the announcers of the game from WCTV. I'm here with John Francola and Larry. How do you say your last name?
LaFleur.
Larry LaFleur.
If all these units,
Who wants to talk?
Italian guys.
Two Italian guys. Larry, what do you think? Big game for Westwood. Really solid.
Yeah, Westwood had a very solid game. They controlled the line of scrimmage both offensively and defensively. They took advantage of the 5 turnovers that Ramsey had. That was a turning point. And it was Giordano. Tyler Giordano set the stage for the game at the opening kickoff. He ran it some 50 yards. And from that point on, Westwood never looked back. So very solid performance.
Right. John, you have some stats probably for us, John? What do you got?
Unbelievable stats. If you like, we'll give it to you right off. He started off with Giordano going 50 yards on that kickoff. And then you had Hopkins with the 1-yard run for a touchdown. Then you had Joe Kramer, number 1. Picked up a fumble, went 30 yards, making 13-0. Extra point was good. Then we had Kramer, an interception on a 35-yard line. And then a couple of runs, and Hopkins from the 1-yard line, touchdown. Extra point was no good. It was 20-0 at the end of the first quarter. Second quarter, Kramer went 30 yards from Hopkins. 11-yard TD. Brown from Hopkins. Extra point was good. 27-0. You then had Baez, who was returned, scored a touchdown. He went for 2-point conversion, making the score 35-0.
So basically, it was like 42-0 at halftime.
And then it was 42-0 with Cuomo going a good run and Baez scoring a touchdown.
Larry, tell me, what do you think? I thought Joe Kramer really stood out tonight. The big play early there, and he made a bunch of catches and.
We've been saying this for about a year and a half now, going into last year, that his size, his strength, his speed, his determination is very difficult for any safety or corner to match up with him. And he showed it tonight, both offensively with some great catches and run, and defensively making the interception. He is someone that the teams that the Westwood are going to play down the road in this group are going to have a very difficult time handling him. If you could handle him, you'll have a shot. If you can't, he could take a game over.
I think there in the first quarter, he had the second touchdown. He recovered that bad snap, and then he rumbled in with guys carrying guys on his back.
30-yard fumble recovery and a touchdown. No, he is the guy that, to me, is being 6'5", 235, you got to make sure there's at least 2 people who play defense on him. If he gets the opportunity, he's got great hands, and, of course, he can play both sides. He leads the team in tackles. As the beginning of this game.
You know, Brian, you're standing here and we're looking on the field, and Greg Matura is interviewing Joe Kramer and Steve Rydell. Right there you see the senior and the junior. They played an outstanding game. Rydell played the best defensive game he's played all year, and there's a lot of upside to him. He's going to get better as time goes on, and next year the sky's the limit for Mr. Rydell. Kramer's going to Dartmouth, so what more can you say? You put a period there, and that's it.
Right. And see, Rydell was second in tackles right now. This young man next year will be middle linebacker and probably fullback. He'll probably lead Westwood into their season.
I think Sean Hopkins really managed the game. I think that was another key thing. No turnovers, just controlling the ball, really managing the team.
He had the running game going, and he just managed that game beautifully. It was an all-around great effort that Westwood needed. There were some times we thought that maybe Westwood wasn't percolating on all 8. They percolated tonight. They're going to need it next week against Newton, and if they're successful there, they're really going to need it in the finals. They're turning it up at the right time, Westwood is.
Right, I think, Ramsey always played them tough. They were always 17-14 last time, always going to play them tough. Tonight, though, Westwood really put it together. And
the offensive line was outstanding. There was blocking, and every turnover resulted in points.
Right. So next week, we'll see you right here. WCTV, we're going to do the show?
Well, we got to get permission from the various organizations, Altice USA and NFHS Network and the NJSIAA. We got to go through all these organizations.
A lot of
alphabets we got to get.
Soup.
But if no one is covering the game, WCTV will be here to cover Westwood's game against either Newton or Pequannock. Right now it looks like Newton, but you can't tell. And then from that point on, we'll see where we go after that to either MetLife or Kane or wherever the venue the NJSIA puts puts Westwood, if they can get by next week.
Right.
That's a big if.
But thanks a lot. Right before halftime, I made a big plug for NorthJerseySports.com, Monday Morning Quarterback, and you guys, we'll have this on Monday Morning Quarterback next week.
Well, we always like to talk about you and Monday Morning Quarterback with you and Jimmy and
Corey
Dvorak and the rest of the guys. You guys do a great job. I like the show because you bring in coaches, you bring in players. It's very interesting, and it's
announcers
and guys like you.
Play by play.
I forget about us. I never think about us.
And wait, tell us how long you guys been doing this. Just talk about. Tell me how many years.
We did our first Westwood High School game on Thanksgiving in 1987. Westwood lost to Demarest. If I'm not out of it, I think it was something like 24-0. So it was 87
now,
Thanksgiving.
We started going way back 35 years.
Well, I went high school. I didn't go
no, but 35 years with Falcon football.
Right.
When my son was 10 years old. So we've done games since then. We love it, and we got another 30 years, Larry.
I don't know if we have 30 years or 30 minutes.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, Brian, good stuff there with Larry and John, two of our personal favorites. And thanks for the shout-out for NorthJerseySports.com on the beloved WCTV broadcast. Great stuff. All right, let's just stick around here in North 1 Group 2 for a second. You know, round 1 had the marquee matchup of Newton and Pequannock. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, that was a tough draw for both teams. And now Newton, still undefeated, they're going to travel to Westwood. And, Jimmy, Westwood's got a tough road here.
There's no question. Newton undefeated, a wing T offense, and the kicker for them, what makes them so dangerous, obviously they have their running back, Chase Kramer. They also have an ability to throw the football. Their quarterback, Luke Young, who's thrown for 14 touchdown passes this year, which is rare in a high school wing T offense. And they have the ability to control the ball. And if you're Westwood, you cannot allow them to go on 5, 6, 7 minute drives, because when Westwood gets the ball, as Brian talked about, if they score and they get that offensive going, it's like a snowball down the mountain. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like it did against Ramsey. But if Newton can control the clock and control the ball and limit the possessions of Westwood, they have a shot. Yeah. They really do. It's going to be a great game.
On the other side of it, Westwood's got to score early, get a lead, and then, for as efficient and tight as a wing T offense can look when it's playing from in front or in a close game or in a one-possession game, it can look like a fish out of water if it's trying to play catch-up. I mean, we've seen that with Ridgewood over the years. The old Pequannock under Cosmo LaRusso that I used to cover in my days at the Suburban Trends was the same thing. It really is a slight advantage goes a long way in either one of those games. So Westwood, maybe even take the opening kickoff if they win the toss and try to punch one in and put them behind early. I think that's probably the way to do it. All right, that's North 1 Group 2. Let's continue our trip here, and let's go back to our favorite bracket. That would be North 1 Group 1. Now, we had a mixture here in the opening round. New Milford handled business. First of all, great job by Woodridge to sneak in as the number 8 seed. It was a cameo appearance, however, as New Milford 42-0 in the first round. And the other game that was relatively comfortable, although still a 2-score game, was number 6 Pompton Lakes going on the road to beat Emerson. Pompton Lakes was in North 1 Group 2 last year, dropped down to North 1 Group 1. They get the win. And then the other two games, Wallington had a big lead on Park Ridge. I think it was 27-0 maybe.
Right. 29. Wallington was up 29-0 and had to hold on to win 29-27.
Yes. So Park Ridge made a great run at it there late. And then Hasbrook Heights, again, for the second straight week, finds itself in an overtime game. This time, Bry, it turned the tables on Cedar Grove. And that was the only game that did not feature a matchup between two NJIC teams. And that's a good win for Hasbrook Heights. Obviously, they're trying to defend their state championship, but also bodes well for the NJIC that Hasbrook Heights goes out on the road against a team with a great winning tradition in Cedar Grove and gets a 12-6 victory in overtime.
Right. Well, now you have here in the final 4 teams here in this bracket are all NJIC teams. The only difference is from the semifinals of the NJIC, you have a replacement because Rutherford's not in the group, and then you got Pompton Lakes who slid in. But Heights had a really tough game they were down and they had to score at the end just to survive to get to overtime. So a little bit different than the week before where they had a tough time with Rutherford and lost in overtime. This time they were able to turn the tide, score, and then go to overtime and score again. And then they had to survive by Purdy doing an interception to seal the victory. The week before against Rutherford, they lose on an interception. This time they were able to play defense and win. So, I mean, in this bracket now, I'll be honest with you, I like Heights, but I happen to pick New Milford. So I got exactly what I want here, a rematch of the two teams who played last year in an exciting game at MetLife. Heights came out ahead and ran away with it in the second half, but teams are a little bit different this year. New Milford's more senior-driven this year than they were last year, and I think they're going to give them a hard time, and I give them the advantage being at home playing Heights. And I do like Heights. Heights could beat them, but just at home field advantage on the grass. New Milford has that advantage because they're used to playing on the grass. Heights doesn't play on the grass all the time, so that's my pick there. So a good game.
Yep. And excuse my sneeze there, the unprofessional outfit that is NorthJerseySports.com. I went to hit mute on the microphone, and instead I hit the monitor, which allows me to hear it in my headphones. So I actually sneezed into the microphone for everybody to hear, and I got a double shot of it as it came right back. It's so great. One day we'll figure this whole thing out. But anyway, Jimmy, I want to get your take on Hasbrouck Heights, New Milford, because I believe that's where you and Dad are heading on Friday night. And I know when your dad comes out for a game and I see him there, I know I'm in the right place. It has to be a big one.
Oh, yeah, it should be a fun one. As Brian mentioned, it's a rematch of last year's state championship that ended in a little bit of, almost pushing and shoving. I know a lot of the Milford people, coaches were unhappy. If you remember the 2-point conversion that Heights went for late in the game, now they get them at home. They got them, and, Hasbrouck Heights has to match New Milford's intensity, I think, in that first quarter, because they're going to come out looking for revenge. They'll be flying sky high. And if they can get through the first quarter on even ground or with the lead, I think Hasbrouck Heights will find a way to get it done. Hasbrouck Heights last 2 weeks, if you noticed, against Rutherford and against a very underrated, as you mentioned, Cedar Grove team, their offense has been a little lethargic. They're going to have to score some points to beat New Milford because New Milford will score some points. I think Hasbrouck Heights' defense, though, has been the savior for them. Obviously, they had two defensive stands inside the 10-yard line against Rutherford in the NJIC championship. And, they held Cedar Grove to 6 points, where if they would have given up another score in the second half, they would have lost that game. So an exciting game on a grass field, as Brian mentioned. It should be exciting.
Yes. And now, Jimmy, you took Hasbrouck Heights to win that section. Brian took New Milford. Yeah. I took Wallington. So why don't you continue down the path here and give us just a little look-see at Pompton Lakes, the number 6 seed, visiting Wallington, the number 2 seed, on Friday night.
Yeah, Pompton Lakes, you mentioned, dropped from Group 2 to Group 1. They had a monster performance from junior running back Frank Negrini last 28 carries, 295 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
That's good.
Obviously season high. That's when Pompton's at its best. They always have big offensive lines. When they can grind the football and pound the football, they're at their best. And, he's got 24 touchdowns this year. So, obviously, if you're Wallington, you have to find a way to stop that Pompton Lakes running game. And for Wallington, Wallington's had a great year. They were, they're in the semifinals, which, maybe no one expected. And, they obviously have an outstanding running back in Elijah Mitchell. He had 132 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. And I think the key for them might be their quarterback, David Backo. If he can throw the ball, and keep Pompton Lakes at bay, I think it's going to be another great game. I think 4 evenly matched teams, 2 very, very competitive games this week.
No doubt. All right, making the switch now. North 1, Group 3, that was one of the brackets that saw some lopsided decisions in the opening round. Defending champion and number 2 seed Riverdale took care of business at home against its neighbor there, Paramus, 28-0 in Oradell. Demarest, 35-0 against Englewood. Second time those two teams have met this season, and Demarest has come out on the positive end pretty heavily both times there. To me, the impressive thing about it is not that Demarest scored 35 points. They've been putting up points all year long. Is that they held a very talented Englewood offense to 0. So that bodes well for the for the Norsemen, who are going to need a similar type of effort this week. We'll get into it a little bit more. Ramapo, the top seed, took care of business against Pascack Valley, 47-16. While the final score looked a little bit lopsided, Pascack Valley did have, I think they scored the first 16 points of the game, or they were certainly up 16-3 or something like that.
And then they were.
Ramapo caught up by halftime and then hit the gas in the second half and took off. But a good showing for Pascack Valley, and I know, I don't know if we were rough on them because we didn't say that it was their fault. I mean, if somebody offers you a playoff invitation, you obviously take it. But they went in at 2-7. No one expected much from them, and then they gave it a real good effort. Maybe one of the better games they've played all season against Ramapo in the opening round of the playoffs. Bergenfield with a good job, 17-0 at Sparta. Sparta, a constant contender in this bracket, playing on the cow pasture that is in its final days, or that might have been its final day in Sparta. Sparta with a 17-0 victory, but a good showing by Bergenfield. Solid season by them. I mean, they beat all the teams that they were equal with or better than, at least on paper. They earned themselves a playoff spot. They earned themselves a road trip, and they had a good showing against Sparta. But, Bri, let's start with you. Ramapo, Sparta. I mean, Sparta not really in our area. Ramapo we've followed pretty closely this year. That's a tough semifinal matchup for Ramapo, as you would expect in an always difficult North 1 Group 3 bracket.
Right. Sparta's got a quarterback. It's Anthony Broccoletti. He's thrown for 2,100 yards on the season. So Ramapo's got to be ready. And they've done it before. They've played David Estevez at Riverdale and in that quarterback duel they had a few weeks ago. So I think Ramapo is up to the task to stop them. They are playing at home. You've got Ramapo with A.J. Winfield, their star quarterback. He can lead them. He's got that run-pass option that he does. He's really solid, and he's got a good running back with Shane Braccoloni. So I think Ramapo, who was my pick to win this bracket, I think they should be able to take care of business here. Against a good Sparta team, but they have to travel to Bergen County. So they got a long ride coming in, and I lean towards towards the Ramapo Raiders to come out on victorious here. Now, the one thing, I think Sparta has played a difficult schedule. They only had one loss. They lost to West Morris, who's in the Group 4 bracket, and they're still in the semis. So they've played a good competitive schedule. So they're going to give them a little bit of battle.
No doubt about it. Jimmy, anything you want to add there, or do you want to switch right over to the bottom of the bracket?
The one thing that's been the kryptonite to Sparta the last couple of years is the fact of struggling with athletic teams. I mean, last year they did defeat Demarest, but Demarest gave them everything they wanted.
I was there, and Demarest softened.
Yeah.
I was there. Demarest softened them up for Old Japan the next week. That's for sure.
No question. And obviously you mentioned Bergenfield, very athletic. Sparta's defense, I don't think gave up a first down in the first half to Bergenfield, but their offense struggled against an athletic Bergenfield team. So I think Ramapo has some more athletes, and obviously Ramapo's offense is tremendous. So I think I give a slight edge to Ramapo.
All right, now moving to the bottom of the bracket, you have number 3, Demarest, against number 2, Riverdale, the defending champ. I believe that's where I will be on Friday night in Oradell for the 6 p.m. start. And again, it's Demarest. If they can play defense the way they did last week against Englewood, they can beat anybody. I mean, their lone loss of the year was against Ramapo. They couldn't stop them. They gave up 62 points, but lost in that was that they scored 35. So nobody has really stopped them. And Riverdale is Riverdale. You look at that score, 28-0. That's about what you'd expect from a DJ Nymphius coach team. Efficient on offense, stout on defense. And Jimmy, I expect this to be a real good game. And, of course, I did take Riverdale to win this bracket, so I'm still alive.
It's certainly an intriguing game, and it's amazing that a lot of people are actually picking the upset in this game. I mean, if you could ever call a 3-2 an upset.
Right.
But you look at Demarest, obviously a bunch of seniors, bunch of 3-year starters. 2 years ago, they went 0-10. Let's not forget that.
Brutal.
Last year, we mentioned they went to Sparta. They got some playoff experience. They're led by Austin Alberici. Obviously, their 3-year starter quarterback was thrown for just under 2,500 yards, 28 touchdown passes, and just 5 interceptions. I think the key to them, obviously, is their running back, who did not play last week. I think it's got Kevin McCloskey. He's run for 1,500 yards. So, and a big physical offensive line. I think that gives them an opportunity. They could run the ball effectively against Riverdale. And then they can go play action with Alberici. Obviously, they're going to score. You mentioned their defense. It's really come along the last 6 weeks. 3 of those 6 games have been shutouts.
Yep.
So obviously Demarest is playing their best football right now. And for Riverdale, you mentioned, they're the Yankees of the 40s and 50s. The consistency is amazing. Another first round, 11 years in a row in the state, sectional semifinal is incredible what they've established there. Dave Estevez, can you ever count him out in a big moment in a big game? I think that's going to be a tremendous game. And, I think Demarest has what it takes to beat Riverdale, but until they do it, we'll see.
I agree with you. I mean, you mentioned Demarest big line. You got Connor Scaglione and Ralph Arias up front. You got good wide receivers in Joe Rotundi and Ryan Vedas. They got a lot of weapons that can hurt you. But Riverdale just so fundamentally sound. I mean, not going to lose assignments, or at least, you would think they wouldn't lose assignments, and they're going to make Demarest earn every point they get. Bri, anything to add on that game?
No, you know what? Because it's a 6 o'clock start, I was expecting Old Japan to be 6 o'clock, our next bracket, but they're going to be at 7, so I'm going to run over there for the 6 o'clock start. And, I haven't seen Demarest except for early in the preseason, so I'm looking forward to seeing Demarest here, and I've seen Riverdale, and I think it's good. This is probably the best bracket. You have all 4 teams here are 7-1. So it's a good bracket. It's not like, we'll talk about later, the non-public Group 4 where, there's only 2 teams with winning records. So you've got 4 good teams in that bracket. So I think that's going to be a real good game. So I want to run over there. And like I said at the opening, I wish I could get to every game or a lot of these games. So that kind of brings us to our next bracket. I don't know if you want to lead into Group 4.
Go ahead.
But our favorite here, who I picked this bracket, I've picked our friends from the Great Golden Knights from up in your neck of the woods, Old Japan, and they're cruising in at 10-0 right now, and obviously I think they're the favorites in this bracket. They're only one of 2 teams undefeated in North Jersey, the other one being Rutherford, NJIC champs. So Old Japan looks good, and they've got a lot of wins under their belt. They have beaten Wayne Hills early in the season. They beat Wayne Hills pretty handedly. And they've also, beaten Ridgewood, who's in Group 5. They beat Northern Highlands, another playoff team. They beat Teaneck last week, and they beat them during the season once. And they did play Ramapo late. It didn't matter, but they did beat them 31-28 late in the season. So, but, they have a lot of the tools. We've talked about the guys, Nick McNerney, quarterback, and really manages the team well. And Marquise Antonore running well, and Aiden Bilali out there, and Sal Benedetto. They've got, plus the line. I don't even know. There's so many guys on the line that are really solid. They always reload. Give them an advantage. Now, one thing I did hear out in the from an Old Japan person that the quarterback of Wayne Hills may be hurt, and I think that's Jared Hayak. That I think I heard a rumor he may be hurt. So
let's
that could
not spread rumors here on the Monday Morning Quarterback.
I didn't spread a rumor. I
heard
think
that
reliable.
too.
Yeah, you heard it too. But they have the weapons at Wayne Hills. You have one of the you have the Hayak boy there. You have an Njoku who has a lineage of wide receivers, brothers of the Cleveland Browns. The other guy just is down at University of Miami. So they've got the weapons. They always reload well at Wayne Hills. So you can't just say no, they don't have a chance. They always are fighting, and they have a winning tradition. So, and these 2 teams have played each other over the last 10 years, numerous times, and I think 3 times in the last 10 years for a state championship at MetLife or Giant Stadium. So these two teams are been there before, and well-seasoned teams and well-coached teams as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, let's be honest. For us in the NorthJerseySports.com coverage area, this is the section final. I mean, and the great thing about it is that it's going to be played on a home field. I'm sure Wayne Hills isn't thrilled to be going to Old Japan, but it's going to be, rowdy. It's going to be an old-school kind of affair. And like you said, these teams have seen each other multiple times across the years in the section final. Wayne Hills 35-0 over Morris Hills in the first round. Old Japan 46-7 over Teaneck. And that just sets up brilliantly for the semifinal. I mean, obviously, I wish it was for the championship because at the bottom of the bracket, you got number 3, Mount Olive, a 36-0 winner over Morris Knolls, and then you have West Morris, which beat Northern Highlands 27-7. But to be honest, I don't care what happens down there. I mean, I don't cover either one of those teams.
I looked at this, and they don't have a strong schedule, these teams. I mean, I think they lost Mount Olive beat them. West Morris beat Mount Olive early in the season. I think it was week 4. They beat them. So this side, these teams 7-3, and they don't have, I think, a great record. And I think West Morris even lost to a down Roxbury team. So I'm not trying to beat up on those two teams.
They don't listen anyway. Who cares?
They're not in our area, but I just don't think that they've had a big, a challenging season. So like West Morris beat Mount Olive, and they're 7-3. They beat Mount Olive, who's 9-1. So
right.
And West Morris has lost to like Roxbury, who's like 2-7. So there's some weaker. There's something. They're not consistent. These two teams. At least West Morris is not consistent, but they have beat Mount Olive. So that's a toss-up game, probably down the bottom of the bracket. So,
Jimmy,
but
Jimmy, what do you got to add?
Well, just you obviously we know a lot about Wayne Hills and Old Japan. Just to give you a little bit about Olive, they were a team on a magical run. I mean, they went 1-9 last year, so to get to a sectional semi is an amazing thing. They are led by an outstanding quarterback, defensive back Liam Anderson. He's run for 1,000 yards, over 1,000, passed for over 1,000, and he's combined for 33 touchdowns. They're a spread offense, so they do score a lot of points. And West Morris is a typical power wing T football team where they're going to run the football. They make no bones about it. You have to stop the power run game. They did lose to Roxbury, but from what I understand, that was one of those, we're going to rest our kids. So that's a little bit misleading. They did play Northern Highlands last week and pretty much dominated them. So it should be interesting to see who comes out of the bracket and the bottom.
North 1, Group 5, just as expected, Montclair rolled through the first round, 63-6. They will play defending champion Ridgewood, a 31-20 winner over Clifton. Union City, a 35-0 win over North Bergen in a game that many people expected to be a little bit closer than that. So kudos to Union City winning on the roof. And Bloomfield, the number 7 seed, pulled the upset of the first round, really, with a 21-3 victory on the road at Passaic Tech, a team that was the sectional finalist last year. Jimmy, I know little about North 1 Group 5. Can you help me?
Well, the overwhelming favorite is Montclair. I mean, they returned most of their team from last year's semifinal team that lost to Ridgewood. I mean, they're led by their quarterback, Tarina Earl, who's thrown for 24 touchdowns, and they have a 4-year starter at tailback, slot back Danny Webb. I mean, who's been unbelievable. He's rushed over almost 1,000 yards on under 75 carries. So
that's crazy.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
For Ridgewood, there's no secret what they have to do. They have to run that wing T, run the clock, keep the ball away from that talented Montclair offense because they will pile on points. They put on 60 against Keaton Prep a couple of weeks ago. They put up another 63 against Livingston last week. Very, very talented. It's like a prize fight. They say styles make fights.
Yep.
It's going to be a slow-paced Ridgewood team against an up-tempo Montclair team, and we're going to see who's going to be able to dictate and impose their will. But I think Montclair just has way too much for Ridgewood.
Okay, that's a Saturday afternoon game at Montclair. What do you know about the bottom of the bracket?
Union City has been a perennial semifinalist team, very talented. They They always have a big offensive line, and their best lineman is going to Army. Brian mentioned them a couple of years ago. They have a couple running backs. They split it, Gene Alvarez and Isaiah Reyes, very talented. And they have a third running back out of the wing T, Jeremy Witherspoon, who's run for 2,400 yards. So they are predominantly a run team. You have to stop the wing T. And for Bloomfield, very talented team, big, athletic. They're the type of team you really don't know what you're going to get from week to week. And, example of that is that 6-3 record. But when they come to play, they have an opportunity to beat anybody in that bracket, including Montclair. So that's going to be a very, very interesting semifinal.
Brian, anything to add? You did see Union City earlier this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think both teams are on a run. The role they're both Union City, who we saw in the beginning. They were at the time 2-3 when I saw them. They were going into that game, and they got to 500. They beat Memorial, and they are on a 5-game winning streak. So, like Jimmy said, the one lineman is a big kid going to West Point. Really good athlete. Seems to be a really nice kid. And then Bloomfield is on a 4. They've won the last 4 in a row. So I think this game is more of a consolation because they're going to have a hard time playing Montclair. Union City, we'll talk about that next week, but Union City has played Montclair, and they played them tough. It was 22-21. 22-7, they lost to them early in the season. So we'll talk about that next week. But I think Montclair will be a powerhouse and roll, and the other game will be a competitive game, and likely Union City be on top of that one.
We all picked Montclair in that bracket, and now it is time to turn our attention to the big boys. Well, we'll do the Group 4, and Group 3 in the non-public brackets, and I only want to do Group 4 first because last week's guest on the show, Mike Quick, made a very eloquent case for the comeback of the Don Bosco Prep Ironmen. That did not happen. Don Bosco Prep was the number 7 seed, lost to St. Peter's Prep on the road pretty handily, 41-18. At the top of the bracket, Bergen Catholic. St. Augustine hung in there for a while, but then Bergen Catholic again hit the gas, 56-21 victors there, the top seed. Del Barton, it was the 4-5 game, so you expect it to be, you expect the 5 seed to have a shot, but Del Barton 42-7 on the road at Seton Hall Prep. And then the beloved Paladins of our very own Jimmy Avatable might be getting it together at just the right time. A 35-7 victory over St. Joe's Metuchen. So it sets up the final 4 of Bergen Catholic against Del Barton, Paramus Catholic against St. Peter's Prep. Just to remind everybody of our picks, I mentioned once again, Mike Quick took Don Bosco Prep. They're out. Brian Carr took Bergen Catholic, Jim took Bergen Catholic, and I took Bergen Catholic. So Jimmy, listen, you're splitting hairs in this bracket every year. I think it was you who brought up the point last week, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago when the seedings came out. I remember you saying that the biggest advantage that Bergen Catholic might have was the fact that it was the number 1 seed. And not that any team in this bracket is bad, but they were going to have the easier road and maybe be less beat up if and when they got to a section final. They took care of St. Augustine Prep. They will be heavy favorites against Del Barton. So maybe this really is the Crusaders' year.
You would think so by that seeding, but let's not forget it was a 21-21 game,
right? With
10 minutes left in the third quarter. I know Coach Nunzio was not happy defensively how they kept and special teams wise, and it just seems at times Bergen goes through a little inconsistent spell. Obviously, first half against St. Augustine, and if you do that later down the bracket, you're going to find yourself in a hole that you can't climb out of. Obviously, Johnny Langan running the ball, Dylan Classy receiving. You're probably going to see McKenzie back off the concussion this week, which obviously will help them. Give Del Barton credit. They started 0-6. They lost 48-0 to St. Joe's. 41-14 against Pope John, 34-7 at Don Bosco. They come back and they avenge an earlier season loss to Seton Hall Prep. I was fortunate enough to talk to Coach Nunzio today about Del Barton, and he said the reason why they're improving is because they're starting to get healthy. So that's a good sign for them. But I just think Bergen is way too talented for them, and I see Bergen really. I think they got a little scare thrown into them, and it woke them up last week, and I think that spells bad news for Delbarton.
Yeah. All right.
I was there. I was able to show up and see the second half there at Bergen Catholic, and at halftime, Bergen was up there originally up in the first half like 21-7. It ended up being like 21-13 at half, and then we got there right as the second half started, and the Hermit Crabs took it down the field and scored. It looked like, wow,
the Hermit Crabs.
That's who they are, the Hermit Crabs.
No, just the Hermits.
The Hermit Crabs. We call them the Hermit Crabs. The Hermit Crabs to me.
They came out of their shell? Is that what you're saying? The Hermit Crabs came out of their shell?
But I think they flipped the switch, Bergen, after they went down. All of a sudden, Johnny Langen just says, listen, I'm taking over the game, and I'm going to win the game. And he was a man possessed after that, and they went on to score 35 points, and they shut him down. It was like maybe the coach said, hey, wake up, guys, it's time. And they flipped the switch, and, man, Johnny Langen was man-empowered, I think, in the second half, and he ran the one drive that they needed to take the lead when it was tied. He basically ran the whole drive, ran down the field, and he ended up scoring. And then from there, they were just dominant. So, but you're right. I think you're right here. They have these lapses, but they seem to be able to turn it on. And once they get to the final, then they're going to be challenged there, likely to be St. Peter's in this bracket. But Delbarton, give them credit. Like Jimmy said, they've won last out of 3 out of the last 4 games. So, it's good for those guys. But I think their season will probably end with a loss here against a very much, Bergen team who's only lost 2 games this year, and they're both out of state. So they've gotten beat up by Mater Dei out in California, the number 1 team in the country. Got beat up pretty bad out there, and they've kind of put it together. So they've been tested, and I think they're going to roll, and that's going to be our pick. And then on to the other side of the bracket there, St. Peter's, we've seen they have the ability to come back, and they're going to be playing Paramus Catholic, and this is a rematch. We were there for the game during the season, and Paramus Catholic, look, they had a chance to win the game. They're up 14-0, and all of a sudden they fell asleep, and St. Peter's came back and roared past them and won 23-14. So, but, you never know here. Paramus Catholic has gotten it maybe together now, and they could win that game. I think Paramus Catholic, 500 right now. So they're they could be 500 if they win that game. So you can't count out the Paladins with their Dan Sabella coach team.
Jimmy, I'm always interested to get your take on the Paladins.
Well, Paramus Catholic obviously has gone through a lot of turmoil, a lot of off-the-field distractions this year. Coach Sabella trying to get the program back in structure. I mean, they went down and they played a relatively new football program in St. Joseph Metuchen, was undefeated. Again, that was a 13-7 game at halftime, so it's not like Paramus Catholic sprinted out in that one. They kind of wore down St. Joseph Metuchen. The question with Paramus Catholic, are they going to have enough offense to play with St. Peter's? Xavier DeVore-Briggs and Christian Bird have taken over the running back jobs. They're kind of looking for a wide receiver to step up. And, Mr. Applewhite, who maybe has not played as well as people thought he was this year, has to have a big game. They're going to have to score some points to beat St. Peter's. For St. Peter's, you mentioned the big win over Don Bosco last week. And you can look at junior quarterback Masai Maynor. He was unbelievable in the first half. He was 19 of 21 against Don Bosco as they sprinted out to a 34-10 lead at halftime. And he's got some, he's got Shane Simon, who's, going to Notre Dame. He might be the best player in the state. Chase Jones, the 2 Adam and Ola brothers, the twins going to Michigan. So I really think Paramus Catholic has an uphill battle. But you just can't count out Paramus Catholic in this game. But I think ultimately St. Peter's, it just has a little bit too much.
All right. That brings up the last bracket, non-public Group 3, and the local interest here is DePaul on the top seed coming off a bye, which is precious at this time of the year. They're going to take on St. John Vianney, which had to sweat out a 45-40 victory over Camden Catholic. So you would think that DePaul has every advantage in that one. And then you got number 3, St. Joseph Montvale, a 49-13 winner over Red Bank Catholic. They're going to host, they're going to visit Pope John. They're making the ride out Route 80. Pope John, the number 2 seed, coming off a 53-7 romp over Donovan Catholic, so I'm sure they were able to get their guys some rest there as well. But, Jimmy, right to you here. St. Joe's, Pope John, that's a rematch of a very hotly contested regular season game.
Yeah, St. Joe's was up in that game early. They had a 2-score lead. Pope John came roaring back to cut it to a touchdown, had the ball, and, had the ball intercepted, and Joe's held on to the game. Pope John, very talented. Burl Neal, running back. Some people might remember him as a freshman at Don Bosco. And Nick DiNucci, another linebacker that I absolutely love. For St. Joe's, I think the key is when they put the ball in Nick Patty's hands and they're aggressive throwing the ball with Nick, he just makes things happen. He's got a great tight end, obviously, in Matt Alamo, Evan Stewart, Isaiah Hopkinson, and they have the kicking advantage with the shoe. Probably the best kicker in North Jersey.
Yep.
Going to be a great game. It's funny. Joe's is the 3 seed who has already beaten the 2 and the 1 seed. So
right.
The seeds in this bracket mean nothing. Interesting to see who comes out of that, 2-3 matchup. And then for DePaul, I think they're licking their wounds a little bit. They pretty much dominated St. Joe's a couple of weeks ago. We're going in to put up a 3-score advantage, fumbled the ball, and I think it unraveled on them, so I know they're not happy with that. St. John Vianney, talented offensively, 10-0, beat Red Bank Catholic, their biggest game of the season. So I think that's going to be a quarterback as Zeke Daniels and Johnny Buchanan, the running back. They're a talented offensive team. I don't think they have a tremendous amount of depth, which plays into the ball teams with Roberson, De Palma, Hickson, and all those guys. So I think it'll be DePaul, and I think St. Joe's will find a way to get it done, but it wouldn't shock me if Pope John wins it at home.
I took DePaul in this bracket. Mike Quick took DePaul in this bracket. Jimmy Avatable took DePaul in this bracket. Brian Carr, the only outlier. It's very strange to me, Brian, that you are the world's biggest DePaul Spartan fan, yet you chose St. Joseph Regional to win the bracket. How do you explain yourself? How do you explain that conundrum?
Well, Jimmy just mentioned it earlier about Mr. Patty. I think what we saw last week, because I was there for the first half. And
De Palma, the Heart, Bri. You're your favorite guy.
I know, we'll get back there. They're not playing this week. That's next week, That's in the final. Then they'll play. But for now, Nick Patty's got to lead them through to Pope John and got to go to Sparta and beat them. But Nick seems to be getting into the championship groove. There was the play I liked. He ran for a touchdown. And I remember he did that last year, I think, against Bergen. He ran like a 50-yard touchdown. And like Jimmy said, he has to take over the game. And Nick did the same thing in this last game where he ran out of his shoe to score a touchdown. He lost his shoe in the backfield and then still scored. So, but Nick, he can run. And Nick can throw the ball. I think the one thing that Nick's got to do, if he's listening here, he's just got to take a little bit of his velocity off his throws. He throws it so hard, sometimes his guys can't catch it because he's like, he's like a professional quarterback. He throws the ball so hard, and he's good. So, if Nick Patty gets that team in a row, they'll easily be Pope John. I think their offense is just gelling a little bit now because their offensive line is younger. They had to replace 4 starters from last year. Obviously, my buddy, Mr. Ryan Botta, one of those 4 guys they had to replace. But, they now seem to be getting it together in the running game. They lost Louis Asus last year on their championship team. They're running back. So they're replacing these guys. And I just give them the edge. They're the defending champs. They've been there before. They've won it. I like DePaul. I think they're a good team. They should have beat St. Joe's up there in Montvale, but they did lose. So, I'd love to see the two of them play a rematch at MetLife, and it'll be a great game. So, and Vinny De Palma, his kid's heart and soul of the team, and Tyquan Roberson can lead that team too. So, that's going to be a great game if they both make it through. So, good luck to both of those teams here. I think DePaul and St. Joe's will likely get through this bracket, and we'll see them at MetLife.
Yep, sounds good. That's the North Jersey-centric state tournament review and preview show here on this edition of the Monday Morning Quarterback, and it came with a free bonus. Brian Carr's quarterback coaching for free. We'll see you next week on the Monday Morning Quarterback.
Follow the leader.